Greetings, psychologists. This is probably a short one, but I think it makes some powerful points. And that is to change how you parent your children, by definition, re-parents yourself, one, and two, it judges how you were parented as wrong. So this what I want to talk about today is more about yourself, and it's more inside your own head and what's probably going to happen with you. Let me try and make this point just by using an example. So let's say you're in some situation, your kids, there's some kind of conflict, they're doing something in a specific way that is triggering for you for some reason. Maybe they're doing that thing. For me, it was like, I grew up with a younger brother. He was like 8 years younger than me, and he would talk constantly. And there was no real place I could go to avoid it most of the time. There was nothing I could do to make him stop talking to me, constantly asking questions, constantly trying to be involved in everything I was trying to do. And so, that was a big point of conflict for me, mainly because I wasn't really able to escape it. And so I wasn't really able to control that input into my life. And I didn't really realize that this was a long-term. I didn't really realize that, like, once I was an adult, this wasn't really a factor for me anymore. And again, I'm just giving you one example. Extrapolate it for your own life, but this is going to happen. So here I am in modern day, 40 years later, whatever. And my kid is constantly talking to me, and I'm trying to focus on what I'm working on. And they're constantly asking questions. They're constantly interrupting and demanding attention and just nagging. And I noticed after the fact, and this goes go make sure you watch the record yourself video for a good way to help yourself realize this stuff. But I handled the situation badly. I basically got upset and I got angry, and I sort of, without getting into the specifics, I reacted poorly. I reacted less good than I certainly wish I had. And I reacted with more negative emotion than I certainly think I should have. And after the fact, as you should always be doing, you should think about what you just did in that situation. Evaluate it for if it was the thing you should have done, if it was the best way to handle it, how you could have handled it better. If you're proud of yourself, if you're ashamed of yourself, you should examine for these emotions, examine for these sort of evaluations on what you're doing. This is self-introspection that you're doing. And when you realize you've hit a situation, like I had in this situation, where I was sort of ashamed at my loss of my cool, I was emotionally triggered in this situation. And by such a silly thing, like when you think about it. Now, you have a kid, they're going to want to talk to you. They like you. They want your interaction. You're their entire world for a long period of time in their existence. It's totally normal for them to talk a lot. It's totally normal for them to ask lots of questions. It's totally normal for them to want attention. Why was that so bothersome for me? And so what I did in that moment was realize that there's something going on here. There's some damage somewhere in my wiring that I need to work on, and not just sort of brush under the rug and hope I do better next time and move on. And so through much thought, like when you have these out of proportion drastic reactions, that is the perfect sort of red flag tell that there's something there for you to work on. And when you, by virtue of wanting to parent yourself better and to react more proportionately and react more responsibly in these situations, you're going to come across these red flags. And what that means is it's time for you to do some self-introspection and some self-work to find out where that came from. What about you? What happened in your past? What happened to you as a child? Where did this stuff come from that maybe caused a pet peeve, caused a sore spot, triggered this emotional reaction out of nowhere? And then you need to go through the process of healing that. And I mean, I can't give you an entire book on psychology in this video, but I can point you to some resources for doing this and working through this stuff for yourself. And I'll do that at the end of this video. But the overall process is you sort of talk to yourself. You figure yourself out. You talk through, like, when was the last time you felt like that? When was the time before that? What was the longest ago time that you can think of where you felt just annoyed that somebody was pestering you constantly and asking questions? And over time, you'll start to figure things out. Well, wow, the longest time ago time I remember is when I was a little kid and I just couldn't get away from maybe my little brother when he was pestering me and doing the same thing. And so that just kind of created this thing in me that has a sensitivity to that constant pestering, question asking, in a just sort of assault on my senses. And you heal that. The last thing you do, and again, I'll give you resources in a second, is that you go back and you re-parent yourself, especially if it was damage that occurred when you were a child. Now, what does re-parenting yourself mean? Well, it means that you sort of place yourself, your adult self, back in that situation you were in as a child in your head, and you go through the scenarios and you imagine these scenarios with you now as your full grown, powerful, intelligent, full of agency self that, isn't limited or controlled rightfully by anyone. And then you imagine what you would do today back in that situation. Now, for me, it was talking to my parents and telling them that I have a need for sort of a quiet place that I can go when I need to get away and be left alone and sort of be by myself and sort of I need an escape from this verbal assault or whatever. And then you imagine what you would have wanted or expected your parents to do in that situation. In this case, it would have been for my parents to create this place for me or to help me negotiate a rule that, like, my room, when I needed it to, could be my place to be left alone. It could be quiet time. It could be alone time. That's what we do it in this house. Actually, we have this thing called alone time. When any of us needs alone time, that's a thing that we just have all sort of negotiated to allow each other when we need it. And so I go back but see, that came out of me reimagining my childhood experience and reimagining how I would have wanted my parents to handle that situation back then, and realize that oftentimes what you would have wanted or needed your parents to do for you back in that circumstance is actually the thing that was missing, that contributed or even caused the damaged situation, the damaged thing in your life to begin with. So what I'm saying is that parenting has a direct, but sometimes difficult to see connection with bringing out and surfacing your childhood damage. And by parenting differently, you will bump into these things that your parents did wrong. And by parenting differently, just the act of parenting differently, if you think about it, is to make a judgment that whatever your parents did was incorrect or wrong or immoral, depending on the severity, right? So we need to recognize and put that front and center occasionally in our mind and sit with that and become okay with that. It's okay to judge your parents' actions wrong. Now, that's a very uncomfortable thing for most people to do, so much so that their conscious mind doesn't really want to even consider it. Like, most people just think that whatever their parents did is the right way to do things because I turned out fine or whatever. I mean, everybody's heard that in parenting discussions, especially around things like spanking. So you go through this process of introspection, reflection, and then finally this imagination-based reparenting, where you sort of rewrite your history in your mind, how it should have gone if your parents were the parents that you needed them to be, if you had the agency which you should have been afforded the same agency that you have as an adult, hopefully, to handle the situations or to defend yourself as you needed to be defended, or to have your parents defend you as you needed to be defended. You know, there's a million. This is a very deep topic here. I'm trying to give you the headline version. And again, I'll end this video with great resources for doing the full-on, giving you the tools to do the full-on deep dive. So the process of you reparenting yourself and imagining ways that it should have gone oftentimes will give you the answers that you need and the tools that you need to be the parent that your kids need you to be now. So that's kind of the full circleness of this process. Your parenting, unless you make changes, will be subconsciously. We act as we were parented. That is we parent with the toolbox that we were handed by our parents, which were handed to them by their parents, and so on back through thousands and thousands of years of the species history. And so when you throw those tools away and declare them bad, you're also sort of judging your parents, which is a psychologically powerful thing. And the way to heal that is to work through a process and to not only, and there's also something healing. This is the last thing I'll say. There's something healing to yourself about parenting differently. So let's say you're in a situation where you needed your parents to defend your safety from something. Maybe you had an abusive parent and you needed the other parent to step in and save you, and they didn't. And there's something about realizing that, working through that, reparenting yourself in your mind, judging your parents' actions as equals, because that's another thing that a big part of what we're doing with principled parenting is accepting that everyone in the scenario, parent and child alike, are equals. They're equal in self-ownership and they're moral agents. They're equal moral agents. And so if you're equal moral agents with these people that were your parents, and your parents made mistakes or did wrong, then you have an equal capacity to judge their actions as moral or immoral, helpful, unhelpful, damaging, harmful, or good, as you do literally any other human on the planet, which is to say a fully perfect, complete justification and power to do that. And you should. And that is an empowering thing to do, is to sort of realize that you were actually an equal to your parents and apply moral judgments to them as equals. And then when you change your parenting to do better than they did, there is something about it that not only finds the damage, but when you finally work through it and then change how you parent, it has this way of healing the damage and making things better. And so in our situation, like I said, we came up with this thing where we get our alone time when we need it. And we also came up with this idea where there was a video on my channel recently where you can actually see this over on Disenthrall. But my son, rather than interrupt me when I'm talking or when I'm working with what he wants to say, he will tap me on the shoulder. 2 taps. Tap, tap, and then he'll wait. And then I make it a point in myself to recognize that and appreciate that he controlled himself. You know, the little kid that he is managed to control himself to interact with me in a way that is less disruptive and more kind to me. That's a really cool thing, and you know, brings you closer in your relationship, because he's going out of his way to make your time in the world a better place by interacting with you like that. And so I recognize that by when I do get those taps, I do try and get to a stopping point, and then I give my full focus to him. You know, I get down on his level if I need to, and I will just, I'll forget everything I was doing and just 100% laser focused on what he wants to tell me and what's important to him, so that he can get that off his chest. And then after we've talked about it, then I can say, hey, so I'm going to go back to working now. I really enjoyed talking to you. I'm going to need to work and have some alone time for X amount of time. Is that okay with you? Something like that. And usually, you know, I've just finished listening to everything he wants to say and given him all the attention he needs. So of course, he's fine with that. And now I've got his agreement again. He's gotten what he's want. Now I've got some solid time to be left alone, and I've got what I want. I've exerted agency that I did not seem to be afforded when I was a child, which heals my inner child And it's just powerful. And maybe I hope you guys can experience it, because it's hard to describe with words how powerful, how awesome, how healing it is for everybody involved. And I love my son and my kids more because of it. Okay, so resources. Okay, so the name of the book is Self Therapy, a step-by-step guide to creating wholeness and healing your inner child using IFS. IFS stands for Internal Family Systems Therapy. It sort of teaches you to think about yourself in terms of different parts, which is easy for most people to understand. You have parts that are interested in protecting you, and you have other parts that are sort of things that get triggered in yourself, and sort of, when certain things happen, they sort of take control, and afterwards you're like, man, what was I thinking? Why did I do that? That kind of stuff. So first it teaches you how to do the work to identify the different parts of yourself. Then it teaches you to respect those parts for what they did for you when they were needed. So oftentimes any of the more disruptive parts of ourself came from bad or damaging situations a long time ago, and these parts grew out of those as defense mechanisms. And so rather than hate those parts of ourself, this teaches you to learn to appreciate those parts for what they did when you needed them. It was sort of like they were there for you when no one else was. And so by learning to appreciate these parts, it sort of heals them a little bit, and it sort of disarms them a little bit, and it allows you to integrate these parts into your self, your whole self as a person. And it teaches you how to actually do the process of reparenting yourself and going back in time and figuring out what should have happened, what didn't happen, what you needed to happen, and reimagining it to make yourself a better person. And there is nothing better for a parent to do than to do this type of work on how they were parented and the damage that they may have had when they were a child, because it teaches you how to be a better parent for your kids in ways that nothing else can. So the book is Self Therapy, a step-by-step guide to creating wholeness and healing your inner child using IFS. It is by Jay Earley, and I'm sure we'll have a link to the book either in the description or in this video for you guys. All right, that is it for today. Again, this was a deep topic, an important topic. I keep saying that. I guess all of the videos are important, and I guess that's fine. If you have questions, if you have comments, I want to see them. I need your feedback. I appreciate your feedback. If you'd like me to talk about something else in this area or subject, let us know. Thanks.